Hello everybody! Today I'm videoing stuff because I'm doing a work log and that's super exciting. That's why I'm in a weird position because I just felt like starting the vlog on my bed for some reason. So this is going to be a continuation of those series I used to do a while ago called work logs, and basically I've got loads of cosplay plans coming up, so this one will be a pretty fun one to film I think, so you're gonna come hang out with me while I do that. Basically I'm gonna be cosplaying, oh this is slightly strange lighting, ooh. I'm gonna be cosplaying Suicide Squad Harley but Genderbend in a Genderbend group, so we're gonna have like quite a few members of Suicide Squad but all as Genderbends. I'm gonna show you what I'm working on. I have done a little bit of this costume before I started vlogging. Let me just sort of show you what I've finished already and then you can get an idea of like where we're going from. Right. This is what I've got so far of the costume. The shirt wise, this is it used to be a long sleeve t-shirt in large, but I've taken it in a lot and resized it and basically completely remade it out of the original base. I also cut holes into it and sort of worked into it like that. These holes in places I noticed on her costume were actually sewn shut, so I sewed those back shut with white thread, and then on some of them where they were visually obvious they were sewn, I've sewn black on top because Harley doesn't actually use matching thread for her costume, so she has this black thread that she top stitches with, so that's what I did. The rest of it is, this is fabric paint, and then I've blurred it out with watered down fabric paint, and so are these bits, and this here is fabric dye, and I used a sort of purpley blue and a cyan blue for that. You can see that I'm wearing pyjamas. I tried to pretend that I was wearing real clothes, I wasn't, I'm sorry. But yeah, so that's my shirt. It's actually slightly cropped as well, so it sort of stops right before my belly button. But yeah, so let's look at the other bit of the costume that's done. Okay, the other bit that I have done so far, like it's not completely finished, but I'm getting there, is these shorts. I'll insert a picture of what I've got finished so far in a minute. The as promised full shot of what I had at that point. You can't see the back of it obviously, but there's also sequins going up the back. Otherwise it's pretty good. I'm working hard and we can get straight back onto working on sequins, so let's do that. I'll be honest with you, this entire sequence is just going to be me sewing the sequins on. This is a really chilled out part of the costume, but it did take a really long time. It took upwards of about 35 hours to do the entirety of sequining the entire shorts. And the shorts are also still functioning as for their pockets, so their pockets are still 100% functional. I do elect to leave out the little strip which is covered by the belt, and that was purely to save time so that I can work on other parts of the costume and really spend my time on the parts of the costume that are going to be seen. This costume did take a very long time, just because there are a lot of tiny details that come into it, particularly stuff like sewing on these sequins. It does look really tedious, but I was really happy with how it came out in the end, so it was definitely worth the time. There was no particular order to which I was sewing on the sequins. I was just going in the flow of how I felt like sewing at that point. So if I felt like doing really big long rows, I would do that. And if I felt like doing maybe the smaller areas where it had to be a bit more detailed, so things like the edge of the pocket or the little strap that goes over the belt, I would move on to those bits instead, just to stop myself getting bored. I mean, obviously it's quite a tedious thing to be doing, but it definitely was worth the wait, and worth all of that effort and sore hands. And obviously, like, I've really improved my hand sewing thanks to doing all of this. I feel like I've done so much practice on my hand sewing because of the sequins. I am of course being very careful to make sure that all the pockets can function, so not sewing all the way through the denim, only going through that top layer, making sure that I'm not piercing pocket lining and things like that so that the pockets do still function. I'm also making sure to leave space for things like the buttonhole you can see just there on the fly. I want to make sure that obviously these all still function so that the shorts will still function as shorts. I also wanted to say the base of these shorts were a pair of shorts from River Island that I split in two and then dyed the two separate sections, one a cherry red and another one a deep navy blue. I believe the blue was actually called denim blue. And I chose to do that just so that I would have a really good rich colour base for under the sequins, so if the sequins did pop up you'd still have the correct colours. And I also then, those shorts were full length jeans when I purchased them, so I cut them up to the length that I wanted, and originally I had them a little bit longer because it is a gender bend, but I just felt like they didn't really look like Harley's personality, so I brought them up a little bit higher, and I think those definitely look a bit more like what I could imagine Harley as boy wearing. So these are finally done. I've finally finished the sequin shorts. I've obviously left this bit because that's where the belt goes. But they are finished, they are done. Both sides are sequined and hand sequined, as you saw. So yes, we're finished, we're done. I am happy. So without further ado, I'm going to start cutting out the pieces for the jacket today, and then we're probably going to wrap up around the point of finishing the embroidery. So let's go, past me. Okay, so right now all we're doing is cutting out the pattern pieces for the jacket. I am only going to show you the blue side cutting out, but basically her jacket is split down the middle, so one side will be blue and one side will be red. I'm trying to maintain that this is going to look even, and because of that I am just cutting the exact same pattern pieces, just only one side of each. If you see the white bit that I'm just using here, this is going to be stiffener. It's an iron-on stiffener that just applies onto thinner fabrics, so you can actually use that to make the fabric hold a little bit more stiffly. And on the back panel piece, as you can see, there is actually a little tiny bit of seam allowance that I've added onto it just in the middle, because the back pattern piece is actually meant to be cut on the curve, so on the fold. You have to maintain that you're cutting these pattern pieces out as close to the pattern as possible, or it will actually warp the size of your pattern. And this jacket I'm actually using is a McCall's pattern, but as I said, just stick as closely as you can to the actual pattern pieces and make sure you're not oversizing or undersizing them. Right, and here I'm going to be cutting the cuff edges, so the cuffing for the bottom and sleeves and collar of the jacket, and this is going to be cut out of a jersey stretch that is ribbed, and it is a red jersey stretch. I am going to eventually paint the yellow onto that as well. There is a Harley has got yellow stripes going across her ribbing, but I'm going to do that when I've finished the jacket so I can position them correctly. I am adding stiffener to the collar here, but I did regret that later and remove it later on. Here I am just pinning the two back pieces together, allowing for my seam allowance that I've put in. And as you can see, we're just going to sew along that edge as neat as you can. I tend to sew very slowly on the sewing machine just to make sure that I get that really neat edge and that all of my seam allowances are the same amount. Here I am just using my iron to flatten out the hem on the inside, and then I'm just going to press that seam out on the front as well, and that just makes a really clean edge, as you can see. That'll be really useful later on when we actually start doing the embroidery as well, because you need a really flat base to be working on with the embroidery. And here all I'm doing is cutting the entire jacket out except for the cuff ribbing in blue lining, and it's a dark blue lining. It's a little bit darker than my outside colour, but that is about as close as I think we can get to her internal lining that I can see on the jacket, because it is very hard to see inside of her jacket in the movie, but from all of the artwork and stills that I've seen, this was as close to the colour as I could find. And of course the back panel, as you can see that I'm cutting here, isn't actually necessary to be having that extra seam allowance now, because you can cut it on the fold. It's also important to mention here that I'm actually cutting out the pockets as well in the lining. The pockets were not cut out of the main fabric, I just thought it would be nicer to have a pocket lining that was a bit lighter and a bit more thin. Here I have just got the pocket protectors and I'm folding those in half, and those have both been stiffened, and I'm just sewing those edges neat side together so the outside will be on the inside, and then I'm just turning them out the right way and pressing them flat. And that is just going to make them look lovely and neat, ready for going into our actual jacket. Here we are pinning the pocket protectors onto the front panel, and then we are just gently tacking those through, and it's going to be a loose tack, so just a really wide stitch, meaning you can just pull it out later on. And then I'm just pinning one half of the pocket on top of that. And then we're just going to sew through all three of those, and only over the area where the pocket protector is. And then we're going to press those flat using the iron again, and press the back as well as the front so that they lay flatly. And now you're just going to pin those pocket pieces, the other side of the pocket piece, to the front side piece, and you're going to pin it along the edge that is going to attach to the front panel. So on that pocket, and press that with the iron again. And then we're going to pin the front side piece to the front panel along the top bit and along the bottom bit, which is not attached to the pocket, so leaving the pocket area open. And also pin along the round edge of the pocket so the two pockets are pinned together, and repeat that for both sides. Sew along those edges, and also remember to sew closed the bottom part of the pocket, so that bottom flap, so that you have a clear seam going all the way along that pocket. The pocket should then function as an actual pocket on the front part of the jacket. Don't forget to press that seam again and sew it shut on both sides. And now we're just going to be pinning that side panel onto the back part of the jacket, so the jacket is slowly starting to take shape now. We just sew there and pin it, and of course press the seams again. Now with the lining we're doing pretty much the exact same thing, except we are skipping the pocket sections because the pocket will just be attached to the outside part of the jacket. So we're just pinning the side parts onto the back there and onto the front, and we're just going to sew those edges again so that it's holding together as an actual separate jacket that we will eventually sew in as lining. Now here, this is my sketched out back panel piece. I've actually put it onto Bondaweb, and it's reversed on the Bondaweb, so as you can see when you flip it through, you can actually see it through the fabric a little bit. And Bondaweb is essentially like an iron-on glue, so it should make my applique a little bit easier for the back patch. And here I am just cutting out every tiny element of that applique, and I'm going to iron it on once I like the layout of it. So I'm just keeping my reference that I've drawn out next to me, so that I make sure that I put everything into the correct place. It is a bit tedious and fiddly, but I feel like it was the best way I could get a really professional looking result. And how you use the Bondaweb is there's a plastic sheen on the back, and you just tear that off once it's ironed on, and then iron it on top just to flatten it down and activate that glue so that there's a strong bond. And then on top of that I am going to do some embroidery on my machine, and that is just going to be top stitching the entire thing. I'm going to be embroidering all over the top of these pieces, and that will be holding it on more securely and also add a bit more brightness to that gold, because I've got a very bright gold embroidery thread. And that is the finished back embroidery. So that's right, I hope you enjoyed this one and it gave you some insight as to how you can make your own Harley jacket. I have been Jared Kennedy, thank you very much for watching, and as always, please remember to be creepy.